This is the Functionised Podcast. May you be a better version of yourself each day. Live Functionized.
Every time I hear that. We've got here Christian Straka. Christian, thank you very much for being with us. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
I saw you a little earlier today, a couple hours. You look so calm. Was that a meditation that you were conducting there on your Instagram?
Yes, exactly. That was actually a mindset session for Adidas runners.
Mm-hmm.
So I host that every week, Friday mornings at 9 a.m. It's like a 20 to 30 minute session where I always talk about a new mindset technique, how to develop these skills that I teach. And then, after we practice for about 10 to 20 minutes, and then there's a little Q&A after. So that's kind of a weekly ongoing thing, especially since, the whole pandemic hit. That's kind of something we emphasize more, like the virtual offerings that we're doing within Adidas.
My meditation was great. The only downfall, I was actually driving at the time. So, and it was pouring out. So it helped me focus in a calm manner.
Yes. I mean, there is definitely a whole bunch of meditations you can be doing while driving, but definitely not all. Like this would not be one that I would recommend.
No. But it was definitely good. You've been doing that meditation for a long period of time?
Yeah, 10 years now. I would say, part of what is really the thing that is kind of revolutionary in the sense that people have not realized is that in one way or the other, everybody is meditating all the time anyway, whether they know it or not. So if you kind of substitute the word meditation with just using certain attentional skills, then you kind of quickly make the connection. It's like, well, I have been doing this and I've been doing that actually like all the time. But the difference, if you are meditating, is really that you're doing it in a systematic and consistent way, rather than just sporadically, when it just kind of tends to happen naturally. And the difference between the two is that on the one side, you're using these skills that you have, but it's not really up to you when to use it. And on the other side, you're not improving those skills as much as you could. So it's really similar to if you're kind of walking, running, like everybody, if you're healthy physically, you can walk and run, and you do it your whole life. But if you're not putting in a systematic training approach, like you will not be able to reach speeds that other people would, when they're put in training for multiple years.
So comparing running to meditation, you go out for just a random run. Who cares how long? Once in a blue moon, you're telling me you're not going to probably hit your peak, are you?
Probably not. I mean, there's an exception for everything, but for most people, that's going to be true.
So I'm glad I actually got to see you with the meditation, because this is a great topic here. You've worked with a lot of high performers before, a very high performer yourself. And at least in my experience, I find that extreme high performers find the time to better themselves. They sharpen the saw. They do those meditations. Yet those other individuals that are just a notch or two below, or maybe they're striving, they just keep on dreaming, maybe one day I can achieve this. I find they're always too, quote unquote, busy for anything else in the world. Have you found that? And how can you personally get somebody that you find might be like right below the level of extreme success and achieving greater than they want to versus just grasping for it all their lives?
Yeah. Well, that actually what you're referring to is something we call the mental training paradox, which is basically in the sports world, whether you're a coach or an athlete on pretty much any level, for sure on the professional level, everybody agrees that the mental capacities that an athlete needs are of the utmost importance. So if skill is similar, technical, strategical, physical skills are more or less on the same level, then the thing that's going to differentiate the winner from the loser are basically the mental skills. And the better you get, the closer you get to the peak, the more likely it is that there's not going to be a significant difference anymore between your physical abilities. And nonetheless, somebody who, let's say in tennis, somebody who is number 1 or 2 in the world and somebody who is number 30 in the world, the one who is number 30 in the world will hardly ever beat the number 1 in the world. And it's not because they're any slower or the shots are not as good. It's just those mental skills that they don't have as consistently. So the mental training paradox basically consists of 3 different things. So on the one side, it is where athletes kind of want to develop their mind, but they don't know how to. They just either don't have access to the necessary information that will get them on the path to really be able to develop those skills in a systematic and consistent way, or they were exposed or are exposed to methodologies that are maybe not suited for what they need to do, and it doesn't have, the benefit that it could have.
Nope, go ahead.
The second one would be a perceived lack of time is what you referred to. Like you just don't have the time.
Right.
And if you're an athlete, if you're just a recreational athlete and you have a work life, you feel like I can't put in another 15, 20 minutes a day to, sit down. I barely have time to go to bed in time. How I'm going to now dedicate another 20 minutes to kind of sit in silence and like develop my mind. I can't even find a place in my home where it's silent to begin with. So that is another big issue. But that's just a misconception, really, because the misconception comes in from you can only develop your mind if you kind of get in a secluded environment and there's no distractions. And you have to do it for 20 minutes at a time. And that is absolutely not true. So that's just really misinformation that people have based on, kind of what they see maybe in the media. And like some people do develop their minds like that, but it's by no means the only way you can develop your mind. There is an infinite amount of methodologies that are very useful and helpful. You can do it while you're training. You can break it up into minute-long pieces. You can do a number of things that all will have great benefits for you. And the third part is then kind of fear of the unknown. Some people think like when I start to kind of mess with my mind in a way, it's going to mess me up more than I like where I am right now. And I don't want that. And it's, again, kind of a lack of information, just not knowing what it is and what you're going to kind of gain from. And all of these 3 things can be circumvented relatively easily with the right systematic approach, and with enough information. And like, when you start doing that, then you're off and running.
Where would you say somebody, whether they be an athlete, they're working up the ranks there, or somebody in business, again, working up the ranks, whether it's their own company or working for a larger corporation, to start when it comes to the mental game?
I mean, there is multiple places. It is a little bit like that, like the person that you listen to, the teacher, the coach, or the system, right, that you want to work with, you kind of need to connect with it. That's for sure true, because different people use different language, and they might be talking about the exact same thing. But you hear it from the one person, and it's kind of not like, it's not the right vibe for you. And when the other person is speaking, you're like, well, this is like as if I would be talking. I just can't phrase it like that he's like speaking as if it would be in my mind. So that's one thing that is very helpful if you find that. The way to find that is by being exposed to different teachers and just being open to really, talk about it. Like, who are the people who are at the top of their field in this particular, let's say, narrow field, right? When we talk about mental performance training for athletes, let's say specifically, but it doesn't have to be. It's in many other fields also. So that's one way to go about it, to just try to start to do a lot of research. Generally, like, of course, my company is doing exactly that, which is called Mind Size. That's exactly what we focus on, where we help athletes in any sport, on any level, any age, to develop those mental skills. But it's definitely not the only one. I mean, Headspace is an app now where you have even little meditations that are sport specific. Then you have certain individuals who do the same. One of them is Michael Gervais. He's a great coach who is very good at that. The difference between, and everybody has their benefits and downsides, let's say, that's like never going to change, right? So let's say the benefit with MindSize, with the company that I have created, is that it's not based actually on what I'm doing. It's not so important like how great of a coach I am, and if I'm not telling you what you need to do, like you're going to be missing out. It's based on this system and the methodology that we have. So even other coaches can learn to teach exactly what I'm teaching, so you can have a wider spread and you can disseminate more information. So everything doesn't have to go through one individual, because that's always great for that individual. He can reach a lot of people, but at the same time, it's somewhat limiting, because how many people can you reach by yourself?
Very true. Now, a lot of head coaches out there, doctors, other experts in the field, or people come to as an expert, get frustrated when others are, those that they're working with are listening to everybody, because now they're all jumbled up in the mind. They're saying, oh, I should be eating this way. I should be training this way. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. And you're kind of talking about getting a little bit of everything. What is the right balance that you found between being well-rounded and finding it works for you versus, here's my coach, here's what he said. He said, run through a wall head first. I'm going to run through that wall. Okay, coach.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's pretty much the mix of that, because on the one side, you do want to go like follow this red line. That's the right for you. If you do too many things at the same time, like, it's not going to work. You need to follow a plan, and that plan needs to be systematic and it needs to be well thought out. Otherwise, it's going to be very ineffective compared to a real good plan. However, if you don't know all the different pieces that might be good for you, if you don't try to explore initially, you can't know which one is right for you. So initially, some people get lucky, and they just find the right thing at the very beginning and it connects very much. But in my experience, more often than not, somebody finds somebody at the beginning, they're like, that sounds great. They try it. And then like after 6 to 12 months, they're like, well, actually, like this is not really working for me. And then they start to go out and explore. But then this exploration takes a significant amount of time, because you go for 6 to 12 months with one individual. And then you go for 6 to 12 months with the next individual or next system. And then you're 4 years later and you have not really followed a single plan yet.
Right.
So I kind of feel like it's a little bit better to do a little exploration at the beginning to just, you can't really go deep in any of them, but you get a feel for like what is the right vibe for you. And you can do, luckily nowadays through the internet, you can do a good amount of research to be like, okay, this coach or this system or this company, like that's legitimate. What they're talking is not nonsense. It's not loosey-goosey, just, kind of pseudoscience. But this is actually based on facts. This is a scientific approach. They have experience and they have some success. And there's enough people who meet these criteria, and enough coaches and teams. And within those, if you explore, then you're already on a safe ground. You're not going to be listening to somebody who is like, maybe you should not be listening to those people. And then it's a little bit easier to find like the voice that sounds right to you. It's just using this similar language that you like. And then you can kind of go into that direction and dive deeper. Now,
to me, quantifying success would be, all right, tennis, for instance, did I get farther than tournaments? Is my income greater? Why do you think some athletes decide to pursue other ventures, other coaches, if they are succeeding? I can definitely see you're stagnant. You're going backwards. Obviously, that's not working. Could be on you for not applying it, all the lessons, or perhaps the wrong things are being taught. So what are your thoughts on when to pursue something different?
The answer in my mind is almost too simple, really. It's just
Simple's good.
People's feelings and opinions. It doesn't like you're basically talking about the facts, the objective facts of why somebody should or should not do something and base their decisions on. If that would always be the case, that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, in my experience, like that's not how every human being behaves. We don't always base our actions on objective facts and being able to just observe our own reactions to things and how we feel and not react to that. But actually, funnily enough, this is exactly what you do, what you train and try to develop when you are doing mindfulness practice, specifically for athletes. You develop the ability to just observe what's going on in your mind. What thoughts do you have? What opinions do you have? How do I feel about something? And then you can act in a way that is more beneficial to you rather than just react based on what you're thinking and feeling. And it might actually be detrimental to your performance in the future. And that's unfortunately what a lot of people do who go through these situations. They might have a coach that is doing everything great and they're succeeding, but in their mind, they're just like, this could be better. Or, they don't vibe with the coach and they just separate for those reasons. And of course, there's multiple reasons. Sometimes it's as simple as they feel like the coach is too expensive and they want to have somebody cheaper because they feel like they can be as successful with a cheaper coach. It could be that there was just a fight basically that erupted, and now you don't want to work with that person anymore. You know what they're saying is perfect. They have helped you. You still respect them, but like it's not a good vibe anymore. And now you're like going with your coach 10 months out of the year, and you're not having a good time. Like the question is, should you be working with him, even though it is successful, but you're kind of like having a bad time most of the year? So it's in the end, there's an infinite amount of different possibilities, what is actually happening, but they all come back to how do you feel and what do you think about the situation that you're in. That's really all that it is.
Subjectivity always gets in the way. Yes. And the grass is always greener on the other side sometimes, it seems too.
Yes.
The thing that you were saying earlier on today about fear as a step there. Fear is primal. It's genetic. It keeps us safe. But when it comes to athletics, when it comes to business, when it comes to family decisions, it gets in the way. And it's just something that it's a feeling, but it's not necessarily reality other than what we make. What are some basics that you utilize to help individuals take steps to get over those fears?
Yeah. So, you already summarized that very well. Like it is essential to understand for everybody that is listening that like fear is a basic human emotion that is essential for survival. And that's where it comes from, evolutionary, like pretty much every other emotion that we're experiencing. Now, the next misconception that people might have from being like, why should I have fear to begin with is, I don't want to be experiencing fear at all anymore. I want to they use that term. So we define the term as overcoming fear. For some people might mean not experiencing fear. That's not something that you want to try to do, actually. You want to learn to experience fear and not be affected by it. So that's a big differentiation between the two. Because fear is something that is in our genetics. Like there's no way that we're not going to be experiencing fear ever again. You want to get to a point where if you notice that fear arises, and fear is an emotion. Emotions are very complex. They consist of thoughts in the mind, and they consist of somatic sensations. So we can call those emotional body sensations rather than, let's say, physical body sensation where you just feel temperature or you smell or taste something, right? Or let's say you feel your breath. So we would put that in the category of a physical body sensation, which is just somatic, right? A somatic experience. But if you're feeling something that you would consider as fear, and you can feel the fear, well, then just to be able to talk about it a little easier, we would consider that emotional body sensation. And these sensations in the body, when you can notice them and you stop fighting them. So you're not trying to suppress it anymore. You're not trying to avoid it anymore. Actually, will stop to intensify. However, the one part of the emotion of fear is not just the feeling in the body, it's also the mind. So, everybody who was ever afraid, whatever, in the last weeks or months or years can probably remember that, yeah, I'm feeling afraid, but I'm also thinking about, what that causes this feeling in the body to make me afraid. It's much more often the case that we replay involuntarily, a lot of times, the story in our mind that feeds the fear in the body, rather than that there's an actual external event happening right now that causes us to experience fear, right? So let's say you can take a simple example, like you're walking in the jungle somewhere, and everything is good, and all of a sudden you hear a sound that sounds similar to a lion, and you will experience fear immediately. You haven't even thought. So that's evolutionary survival instincts, and that fear there obviously is very helpful. But now maybe you look around and you see, well, that sound that you heard actually was not a lion, it was just something banal. And immediately your mind lets go and the feeling will subside relatively fast, actually. We're talking about, seconds to a minute. And the fear in the body, the feeling, will not be there anymore. But now, if you are thinking about an athlete, and he or she or them might be afraid of losing the next match. Mm-hmm. Nothing is actually happening. It's in their mind. And the story of possibly losing keeps going on, and the fear never subsides. If anything, it might intensify until the moment when they forget about thinking about it and they get distracted by something. And then as soon as they start thinking about possibly losing, the fear comes back. And that is what we want to kind of learn to work with, where somebody notices what is going on in their mind. They notice how the thoughts affect the body. And then you have certain strategies that you can implement. And this is all things that you can learn in a system or in a methodology, where it's like, what strategy can I use for me if I'm experiencing fear that is kind of irrational right now, and it's also not beneficial to my performance? And then okay, so I use the strategy of divide and conquer, let's say, as a strategy. And I turn my attention to one of the experiences, and I try to create a different relationship to that sensory experience. Mm-hmm. And then you're off and going. But until you get to that point, you need to, understand the system, and you need to practice, of course, a lot to develop those skills. But that's the basic approach.
I once heard before a Super Bowl, Eli Manning was talking and saying that his motivation comes from the fear of losing. Yes. Do you find that fear can often be turned into motivation, or do you think fear often keeps individuals from that success? After I heard him say that, I'm like, great, the Giants are going to lose today.
Yes, that is a great example. Everybody reacts differently to everything, externally and internally. So another example you could say would be Michael Jordan. I don't know if you saw The Last Dance, the documentary. Yep. And his motivation came from his desire to be better than somebody else. And a lot of times it would be fueled by a certain degree of anger, right? He would get upset because somebody would think that that player is actually better than him. And he was like, what? Like, that, you think that guy is better than me? I'm going to show you. So it's not fury that he was experienced, but it was a mild degree of anger, or being upset, let's say, and now wanting to prove that actually he is the best. And in his case, that emotion caused intrinsic motivation, which is also an emotion, right? To a degree that he could do anything that he wanted. And he had the physical and coordinational skills that would match whatever he wanted to do. Of course, that's also not always the case. So John McEnroe is another example. If he would get angry, it would help him. He would be more motivated until he would get too angry, and then it has a detrimental effect on his performance. But out of my experience, most athletes don't experience as a side effect intrinsic motivation based on fear or anger. Anger, it's not that uncommon, but anger is just also not that often an experience that you have that is subtle. And as soon as anger becomes too intense, you're off the rails. So it's more like this competitive edge, trying to be better than somebody, or some positive emotions that you could experience that are pleasant, that will result in intrinsic motivation. Use noticing that you're getting better, positive thoughts in your mind, and so forth. But, it's also not 1 in 1,000 of especially pro athletes, I think, that have this positive connection between subtle anxiety, subtle anger, and then having that cause more motivation. It's kind of like pro athletes, it's not too uncommon, I would say.
Much more of a balance going on there. You brought up Michael Jordan there and his desire to win. Do you find that, his abilities were just amazing as well, but if you took two guys with about the same ability, and the way you describe Michael Jordan just breeds an alpha dominance. Like, I am the biggest dog on the block. I am going to prove myself out here and show everybody I'm the biggest dog. I think when it comes to two athletes, that the one who is that greater alpha mindset will prevail?
That's a good question. I think we have to look at it a little bit broader. So in Michael Jordan's case, let's say, he was the alpha because he believed to be the alpha, and because he was just statistically looking at everything, he was the best player. But that is not based on him thinking that he's the best, and the result of him actually being the best on the court was not the result because he was thinking it, because he put in the time and energy that nobody else did to that degree. All the pro athletes work very hard, for sure, but there's still a difference between the people at the absolute top. If you think about how many choices you make every single day, I don't know the number, but it's just an infinite amount of decisions you're making every day. Subtle decisions, right? How much water do you drink? When do you go to bed? Do you go out for a walk now, or do you relax? Do you do an extra stretch, or do you not? Do you train extra 10 minutes? And then each of those things, whatever you are or are not doing, you will pay a certain amount of attention to it. So the intentionality, the amount of effort you put into the activity that you're doing, will have a significant impact on how effective that session will be. So if you take Michael Jordan, it's very apparent that on the one side, he, especially in his younger years, every single thing that he did was with the one goal to be the best basketball player that has walked the earth. And from literally the moment that he got up to lying down, to what he's eating, to how much he's practicing, every single decision and if you do that over years, that has such an impact. It's hard to kind of comprehend that if you have not experienced that to a certain degree yourself. On the other side, because of his motivation, he was paying so much attention when he was practicing. He was not going on the court and just for 3 hours shooting hoops and laughing in between and this and that. He was going there, and he was trying as hard as he would be in the NBA finals. And it was the seventh game, and it's basically 100 to 100, and you had 10 seconds left. And you practice with the same intensity and intentionality in every single practice. But you're not practicing any more than anybody else. That's also going to improve you much more. So he did both of those things.
Yes.
That you see hardly ever. I mean, we're now talking about, you have probably tens to hundreds of thousands of pro athletes in the world in different sports that are amazing. But that degree, we can now maybe name 5 to 15 people over the last 20 years who had that intentionality.
Yes.
And that's why, like, I would like to kind of put that into perspective, to be like, yeah, if you're the alpha and you are doing all of these things, if you're on the court and you have the same physical skills, all of these little things that you have done over the years are going to be part of the reason why you are going to be the one who comes out on top. And it's not just because you're thinking you're the alpha, and you're super focused in this very moment.
Now, there's definitely seems to be a difference in athletes over generations. The mental game seems to definitely be coming into play a lot. Even the caliber. People start comparing, say in basketball, who's better? LeBron, Kobe, Michael, Wilt Chamberlain. Do you find that there is generational differences when it comes to the mental aspect of the games?
I mean, whether there's general or generational differences in the mental aspect. So on the one side, yes, because you have information available right now that you didn't have 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you had information available that you didn't have 20 years ago, and so forth. And that has a significant impact. So if somebody 20 years ago would have had a coach that knows what we know right now, I mean, we can't say what impact that would have on that individual. Arguably, it would have a positive impact. Therefore, they would be even better than they were.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with material. Tennis players have rackets right now that allow them to do things completely different than 25 years ago or 50 years ago. And that it doesn't just mean that one shot that they're hitting. It's like you learn to practice with that. So you're able to practice completely different things than you practiced 50 years ago.
So if you had a wooden racket,
yeah, exactly.
A little bit different, right?
You can't hit any of the shots that you hit today other than a volley, basically, or a slice. Like, you can't hit maybe the first serve, but it won't be as fast because the material is not as efficient. But like most of the shots that need to be hit, let's say 80% of the time, you couldn't have hit 50 years ago. It's impossible. The head was as big as my hand, basically, made out of wood. It was 3 times the weight. You can't accelerate the racket as much. I mean, it was crazy. But that being said, what does not necessarily change over the generations is just how a person ticks, what drives them. It's like the methodology, the training changes over time, and they can take more advantage of that now. But I have actually not seen that much from LeBron. And LeBron is obviously like one of the greatest athletes of all time in any sport.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at Michael Jordan, like what he has done in terms of training and dedication over all of these years, I mean, that was just from my perspective, I have just not seen that from anybody else. But I can't say like LeBron is not at that level because I haven't seen the opposite either. I can't say that he's not as focused and training as hard as Michael was for all of these years, because I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just very rare. It's having somebody dedicate that much energy all the time over all of these years. That's people like Michael Schumacher, Roger Federer, Michael Jordan, and Tiger Woods. But then it's also very interesting to see like that can change at any point in time. And that's something that has a big impact on like the greatest of all time. It's not just, do they have a personality like that, just naturally given, that is so driven, has so much intrinsic motivation that they will do anything, literally. I like this saying from Boris Becker when he was young. He's like, if my coach would tell me, in order for you to be the best, you need to eat shit, I'm going to eat shit. Like, I don't care.
Right.
And that's the basic mindset. You do whatever it takes. Okay. No matter how ridiculous it might be, as long as it's safe, like you're going to do it because you want it that much. But just because you want it that much right now or for the next 3 years doesn't mean you want it that much for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Jordan, with that break in between when he was playing baseball and all the hardships that he went through, like did that for a long time. So did Federer, right? So did Nadal, Michael Schumacher. And that's kind of why I feel like we see those greatest of all time, is because they don't have this unbelievable skill and motivation for a year or 2 or 3, but now you need it for 10 to 20 years, because that's how long those athletes, are at the top.
Now, there's some athletes that decline because of age. They're getting past their prime. The younger guys are coming up. And from an athletic perspective, the younger guys start to become better. There's injury, but then there's the rare occasions where the top guys kind of fall. And it seems to be more of a mental thing than it is a physical thing. Why do you think that happens at times? Where does that imbalance start to occur?
Well, I mean, that's basically exactly what I just try to communicate in a way. It's like at any point in time, it's similar to the coaching situation that we talked about earlier. Like, you have a coach and he's great, you're winning, everything is perfect. And now you decide to, no, I don't want it anymore. It's a feeling and it's a thought in your mind. I mean, it's as simple as that. So you're playing, you're doing great. You're the greatest athlete in the world. For 3 years straight, you're winning everything. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you have a thought in your mind. Let's say, well, I don't want to do this anymore. And that thought resonates. It's not like a thought where I say, oh, there's a pink elephant. And the thought has no emotional attachment to me. Mm-hmm. That thought sticks in my mind. I can feel something that I feel it to be true. So I believe it. And when that happens, then you're done, basically. But that might change back again also. It always depends on how do we relate to what is going through our minds. Right. And some people just have those minds that function in a way that there is so much motivation already. But it's important that also a lot of people don't know is you can foster intrinsic motivation greatly. Your mind basically does what you train it to do. So if you're going to have a lot of negative thoughts in your mind all day, right? We have tens of thousands of thoughts every day. Around 50% of them we don't even notice. Mm-hmm. But they affect us. And the more you think a thought, okay, let's say, I don't want to do this anymore. And you think that thought 1,000 times a day. And 900 times of those 1,000, you won't even notice that you thought it. It's not like you're telling yourself intentionally, I don't want to do this anymore. It's just like goes through your mind over and over. Well, I mean, after a week, that's just what you're going to be thinking most of the time. And you're going to act accordingly. Right. However, if you notice that and you kind of don't want that, you do want, but you notice it doesn't feel true for you. Somehow your mind is telling you, I don't want this anymore. But if you try to take a step back and you try to take a different perspective, think about it more clearly, you're not so caught up in your mind. You're like, actually, I do want this. There's certain things that I want to accomplish. You can train your mind to not have those thoughts anymore. So you now set an intentionality and you start to intentionally think something positive. So what people call affirmations, right? Or mm-hmm. positive visualization, but in a systematic, consistent way. And now you intentionally repeat a thought like, no, I want to do this, whatever this might be, 1,000 times over this day. And you do that for 2 weeks. All of a sudden, 2 weeks later, your mind is going to say positive things when you're not trying to say something positive. It's amazing how our minds are adaptive to, what it is repeating, and then intentionally or not. And that's just what it's going to do by itself in a way.
It's powerful. Very, very powerful in becoming that. I mean, use those affirmations again and again and again.
It's kind of like what some people call that fake it till you make it, but there's a truth to that. And that we have like a significant amount of scientific studies that suggest that all of these, like how positively all of these practices impact us. And what you can actually do with your mind. There's a book called Altered Traits, which basically only talks about the scientific evidence of meditation practice and different meditation practices, right? There's so many different kinds, and how the minds and the people are affected if they hardly meditate, if they meditated, a little bit for a couple of hours, like an 8-week course or something like that. How the minds function if people meditated for over 1,000 hours, and then how the minds function of people that meditated between 10 and 50,000 hours. And if you look through those studies, like the physiological data, the EEGs, the fMRIs, the hormones, the differences, you would think like we're in a science fiction movie, really. Like it's insanity what can happen.
Really fun.
Yeah.
Christian, if you could take me through the evolution of yourself a little bit. How did you get to this point? I mean, you started playing tennis. So when did you start playing tennis, and how did you progress into Coach Christian?
Okay. Okay, I have to think about how many details I will give. I will try to put this into like a 5-minute.
Your whole life in 5 minutes.
I started tennis when I was 4. My dad was a doctor, but he used to be a world champion in volleyball, actually. So he was an athlete. He just took me with him to the tennis court. Like, your parents take their kids to just go with them. I started playing and, was just a little bit more talented than the average kid, which resulted in me learning faster, which had the effect of me enjoying it, winning matches and so forth. So by the time I was 8, I was in the national squad. By the time I was, let's say 12, I was like always in the top 10 in the nation. And then I decided, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be a pro. I want to be number 1 in the world, and I want to win Wimbledon. Simultaneously, I never believed that. I wanted it, but I didn't believe I could actually make it. Okay. And then I played very well. I had like one peak time when I was around 14, where I played in my junior years, like the best I've ever played. And I was pretty much like beating the number 1, the number 2. I broke my wrist right in that time, and I had to skip the biggest tournament during the year. And that was my first time I had an injury, and it took kind of a dip for a moment. And then I came back, and then from that moment on, I was kind of back to where I was, like top 10 in the nation. I kept playing, but all good, but not like, having this peak and really going out and exploding, which is an essential kind of experience you need to happen if you want to really excel in whatever where you're at. So then when I was 16, I moved to Spain. I decided to cut school short and go pro. Then I played with Federer at the Australian Open. We played doubles together, and I played well, but not difficult to figure out. He was better, but it was very enjoyable to play with each other. We had a great time. We got to the semifinals of the Australian Junior Open. And then when I was transitioned out of juniors, when I was 19, basically, I started on the pro tour, and I was a little bit of a late bloomer, and not because of the physical skills, but because of my mental skills. Mm-hmm. So my performance on like a pro level was very up and down. It was not consistent enough. I know now that was because I wasn't able to perform independent of how I felt or what was going through my mind. And I was not able to pay attention to what mattered when there were challenges happening. So when I would start to get a little bit anxious in a match, I was not able to pay attention to what I needed to. So I was basically caught up in what I was feeling like, and therefore, I was not playing good anymore.
Right.
okay, by the time I was 20, I started to have more injuries. I broke my hand again. Then I had an injury on the foot, and it was like back and forth. And then when I was, I think, 21, I started to have severe pain in my right arm. Could not really play anymore properly. Wanted to continue though. Did 6 months of tests, like all over Europe, and with the biggest specialists, and they all agreed, after having tests for like nerve damage and brain cancer, and I don't know what they were thinking that I might have, that I have something called the thoracic outlet syndrome, which means that the collarbone and the first rib, which is right below the collarbone, are too close. And when I lift my arm above, a certain height, then that's causing the pain. And if they remove my first rib, that pain is going to go away, and then I can play again. So I was like, okay, I really want to play, so let's do that. They removed my first rib. It took 4 to 5 months of rehab. And when I was able to play properly for the very first time again, based on like that surgery, because it's a major surgery,
it is.
The pain came back. The same pain exactly. So then I decided, okay, this is it. I'm not going through this again. So I decided, like in that moment, I remember that moment like it was a minute ago. Like I'm standing on the court, I know, in Spain, like I hit that ball, I feel the pain, I'm like done. And then I took 6 months to be like, okay, what should I do? And my coach, my mentor, Klaus Hofsays, who's like one of the tennis coaches in the world, said he thinks I might, be a good coach possibly. Like he thinks like I have like this thing for it. So I was like, I never thought about being a coach or a teacher in my life. I mean, not once did that cross my mind. And I was like, really? So I was like, maybe go to college. And I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, let's do like a coaching kind of certification that took 2 years. And like I did that. And I did have, and he was right. And I enjoyed it very much. And very early on, I had success as a coach. So I coached Azarenka and brought her to #1 in the world in the juniors, and Petkovic, who was top 10 in the world on the WTA tour, but not when I coached her. Like I kind of started coaching her earlier on. And yeah, and then basically that was the first step towards becoming a mental performance coach, because I started seeing that, well, all of these athletes, it didn't matter whether it's Azarenka or whether it's a good pro but not being able to reach the top, or it's a recreational athlete, that the difference, the thing that's most upsetting to all of them is when they know how good they can play and they are not playing as good.
Right.
That's kind of like what gets everybody fired up, right? If you are not able to ever hit that one good shot, then it's not kind of upsetting. You're kind of like, okay, like you're accepting like the level that you have. But if only once or twice you hit this one good shot and then you don't hit it more often, you're kind of losing your shit. So I started realizing that the vast majority of athletes, with the exception of the very, very top, have a level which is their optimal level of performance. And they are not able to reach that level very often. And even if they do reach it, they only reach it for a short period of time, and then they dip again. So within practices, within the matches, they're not like, oh, I have a good day and now they play good the entire match. Is they have a good day, they play good for 10 minutes, and then they dip again. And if they're lucky, they come back. So it's very up and down. And I was like, this is exactly how I was.
Fraction of the flow state, and then they're
yes, out. Exactly. So then when I kind of figured out what the issue is, but I didn't know that there's a solution to it. I just thought like, I didn't know how to approach this issue. And then I learned, and it was a mixture of like what I learned from some people, what they told me, and my own experiences. Like I remember I was sitting in this car one day and I was kind of a little bit upset and a little bit anxious, just unrelated, just general life kind of situation. And I was thinking about this one person where everybody's like talking so positively about them. And they're like, this guy, he's always so awesome. And he's the nicest guy and so humble and so successful. Like it's amazing. And I'm just thinking to myself, like this is just like a story in my mind playing playing right now. And I'm just thinking like, why can't I be like that? Like, it can't be because like he has so much money or he's famous. Like nobody is ever happy and respected just because they are famous or they have a lot of money, right? Kind of, that's always very fleeting, positive kind of emotions. So if somebody generally is happy and generally behaves well, like it's independent of that. Like, why can't I be like that? Independently of how little money I have. Like I have shit. Right at that point, again, I was living in Germany. I was like, I can just be like that. So I was like, yeah. So how am I just like that? Because I want it and I can't do it right now. I can't be happy like right now. Why is it not up to me? Because a lot of times a thought will come into my mind, and immediately when that thought enters my mind, I'm upset or I'm anxious.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I think a positive thought intentionally, and I'm not happy immediately. Why can it work in the negative direction in one way and not in the positive direction? I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And then I started putting in a lot of time to figure out like how that, if that is possible, to change that. And it is. And who knew? It's out for thousands and thousands of years. But people are not talking about it in a way that kind of is systematic and like logical. And it's a lot of times it's like covered up in something that people can't connect to. And I have like more like a straightforward mathematical mind, even though I'm not good at math. So when I found the right people that talked in a way that I could understand, that had the same language that I was using, I decided to put every single second. So that's where the intrinsic motivation comes in. Once I realized that it is possible to develop the ability to pay attention to whatever you want for however long, no matter what is happening, I was like, I want to be able to do that. And once I realized like I can be unaffected by external situations and including internal situations. I could be super anxious and it could not bother me to be anxious. I was like, I want to be able to do that. So then it was practice. So first it was figuring out like that it is possible and how to do that, the intellectual, conceptual kind of process. And then it was the experiential, practical process where I went through for years and years of training. For, at the beginning, some people do minutes a day, and then you evolve and you get to, hours a day and so forth. And once I had developed those skills to a degree where I was like, if I could have done that when I was playing, this would have been so fucking ridiculous. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? That is so crazy. Yep. And at that point, I decided I'm not going to teach anything else anymore. Like, everybody who is interested in that, because you need to meet people where they're at. You can't dogmatically tell somebody you need this. It's like, no, you don't need it. It's like, what do you want? And if you want this, well, then here's something that you can try out and it might work for you.
Right.
But that's what I then developed with my partner, Juliana Ray. And we have developed this amazing system where everybody in the world can develop those skills now, no matter where you are, no matter how old you are. And it's kind of the best thing that I have ever done in my life that I'm most proud of, is having been part of something that gives other people the chance to develop skills that will improve their performance independent of the situation they're in and increase their happiness independent of the situation that they're in.
Love it. Well, aside from some of your clients on your website, Adidas, Netflix, Facebook, love it. If others here want to get in touch with you, individuals want to achieve that higher level performance, how do they do so?
So you can definitely check out more detail on my website, which is mindsizesports.com. And obviously there's a box where you can contact us, or you can also go onto my Instagram page, straka.la, or as some of my friends like to say, strakala. And you can message me there, or I upload a lot of videos, also little practices, so you get a taste for something. And the same thing on my Facebook page also, which is also straka.la. So those are basically, or my website, my personal website's www.straka.la. It's all Strakala, where you can get all of that information. You can contact me through different means, and get more into this subject.
Awesome. I could just keep hanging with you all day, Christian, but I'm out of time. But I certainly appreciate you, and thank you so much for joining us and being on the Functionized Podcast. You're amazing, and thank you very much.
This was amazing. It was a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on there. Can't wait to watch more of your shows. You guys are doing really fantastic. This was a real pleasure.
Thank you, Christian.
Awesome. Thank you, my man.